Hello, beautiful people. My name is Kristen. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel. I know I've been MIA a little bit, but I had to come back because I really wanted to talk about the book review that I'm sharing with you today, MacArthur's Bloody Butchers by Brian Bruce. This is a account memoir, documentary, all kind of put together about World War II, the war in the Pacific, which honestly doesn't get a whole lot of dialogue about that normally. And so, you hear a lot about storming the beaches of Normandy and World War II, you're thinking Germany, right? You're thinking Europe. But really, with the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the Japanese being such a fierce foe, there really was a lot going on in the Pacific. And I was very interested in that part of history personally because my father's father fought in World War II on the Pacific side in Burma. In fact, this year I wanted to briefly talk about James Holland's Burma 44, which also was published this year. It is the account, obviously, over in Burma, over on the part with like India and China and that part of the war. And my grandfather flew the supply lines, and I remember him talking extensively about his part of the war and that the fierceness of the Japanese as the opposition was equal to the terrain and weather, the mountains. And he said, he was so often flying blind, like he was relying on the instruments and his own instincts because he couldn't see, he couldn't totally have visibility. He was hiding from the enemy and going down into terrain that a lot of pilots didn't make it through. It was a very high mortality rate just between the enemy and the terrain. So this was great. It reads very much like a well-written textbook talking about the war in the Pacific, and I learned so much more. And there was a lot of mentions where I could picture my grandfather actually in that part of the war and doing his patriotic duty to bring about that victory over Japan. Which, fun quick side note, my father, who is his oldest son, was born the day of victory over Japan, August 14th in 45. And my grandmother, being the lovely stubborn woman that she was, said, I am not having a war baby. I'm not having a war baby. I'm not having this baby till the war's over. And to her word and to her determination, she didn't. So, but here's the deal, y'all. I wanted that book to be a personalized story. I wanted to know those men and women who were over there fighting. I wanted the backstory, and it doesn't have that. It has a lot of recollection of the stories themselves, the battles themselves. It mentions the generals and leaders and commanders and what they did, but it didn't go into what they were thinking or feeling. It didn't include a lot of diaries or personal letters. And that's where I get to talk about this book, about MacArthur's Bloody Butchers. So right off the bat, we find out in reading these accounts, it's following 4 different men who are traced all the way from being drafted and brought overseas into the war, into the different places that their Company G was stationed, what the assignments were, how they felt about it, what food they were even eating, how were they sleeping, what was going on. And I could totally feel the angst or the discomfort of the swamps, of the mosquitoes, of the illnesses that they were dealing with. It was very, very much personalized. And as a woman in particular, speaking to my female readers out there, I really think that's what helps when I'm talking about an account of sports or war or some of these more masculine kind of feeling stories. When there's the account of the humanity and the individual, like, hey, he's got a wife back home, he's expecting a son or daughter to be born back home. Those are the kind of things that really bring the emotions and the reality and the hard truths of the accounts to light. And Brian Bruce does a beautiful job of this, and it is well notated throughout the book, like where these come from, coming from interviews and documents and historical records, and then presenting it as not only a telling of the history, but the telling of these families and kind of what they're going through. And I love the accounts of, in particular, the soldiers encountering other people in Australia where they were first kind of trained and stationed, because I did not even know the extent of how much the Japanese were trying to invade Australia and use that for its own purposes, its own land and resources, and how scary that would have been for the Australians, and how critical it was for the British and the Americans to, you know, be part of that defending, and then going into New Guinea, going into these little islands that they were using as points of entry into Australia, just like Hawaii would have been, or Alaska would be a, you know, good place for them to start their conquest of the United States of America. So it was the tension, I mean, we know the end of the story, right? Because you know enough history to know where we're at now. And yet you were, because of the accounts, really waiting for how is it going to play out? Like, how does it come to the end of the story that we know about? Getting to know these wonderful people. And I loved hearing the stories about America, for instance, really recognizing the fact that not all Asians were the same, right? Like there would be a Korean over there and they would realize that they were an ally and a friend of ours, instead of just assuming that they were always part of the enemy. That they would get to know the local cultures in New Guinea and treat them well and with respect, and like, hey, we're here to, you know, be part of the solution and to stop these threats. And you know, that allowed them to have those relations. I'm not sure if enough of that goes on nowadays. Like, these are some lessons that we could really gain from our past to really implement into our present and in towards a future, right? It's like not annihilating other cultures, or not being the big, like, hey, we're here doing our business and, you know, you just need to move aside. But no, let us partner with you, help us out. And they would even label some of the locals as angels because of how beautiful they were to help, to actually get involved, to actually participate in part of the fighting. It was just really, really great. I feel like I kind of know a little bit about these families. I feel like I kind of know a little bit more about Brian's family and his uncle in particular, who is one of the characters we get to follow in the book. I just really feel like I have a much deeper knowledge about what was going on over there. And if you have any interest in following war stories, history, and particularly the personalized, getting to know people who have been through these kind of things, it resonates very much to similar accounts of Vietnam, of the Korean War. There's a lot of similarities and bondedness there to be gleaned and to be had. I was going to show, this is the kind of map that I would keep opening to and referring to, because I wasn't exactly sure where all these islands and places were that were being talked about even, as well as there are a lot of pictures. I know I will link to purchase the book below, but I know you can also buy it in ebook, and I'm not sure if the ebook has the pictures or not, but there is quite a few. There's quite a few pictures, and just like looking at the actual pictures along with the story just adds that much more to it. So I recommend the book. I recommend getting the book. I know it's a hardback, so it's a little pricey because hardbacks usually are, but I totally think it's worthy. I totally think it's worth it. I totally think this is probably the best book that I have read all month. And since I'm not doing other review videos right now, I will go ahead and try to remember to put in the description box the other books that I've read. If you're interested in any of them, leave me a comment. I'll at least promise to answer your comment about my review or thoughts on them. If not, put them into a future video at some point. But I did want to give a shout out and a thank you to Brian Bruce for writing this book, for educating me on this part of the war, for allowing me into part of his family history, doing the hard research and interviewing these other families to tell their story. It is well worth documenting and living them out and holding on to the sacrifices, to the values, to the integrity that these men had, and to hopefully in us reading these things, we can absorb some of those values and ideas and compassions to integrate them into the rest of our lives too. That to me is the ultimate kind of silver lining, if you will, of war, which is a horrendous, horrible, not good thing. And we need something beautiful and redemptive to come out of it. So that is my thoughts and feelings on MacArthur's Bloody Butchers, which I forgot to circle back to and say it does explain that was a nickname that Company G adopted because of a criticism that a local newspaper reporter was like, oh, these people went into this raid and did these things that were inappropriate. And in the book it explains like why they did it, and you know, you got the behind the scenes to know that it was a tough situation and they did the best and you know, did what they had to do, but they kind of like took pride and said, yeah, we are the Bloody Butchers. And that was a kind of a humorous moment to like kind of making the most of what I'm saying in a really bad, difficult situation of war and turning it into something, you know, redemptive. So we will end on that note and go check it out. I'll leave the link below to Brian's channel as well as to his book. So check them out. Thank you. Like and subscribe if you're not already. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.